Welcome to Empowerment Time, our weekly program brought to you by Independence House. Today we began a series of programs about domestic and sexual violence, its prevalence, its impact on those around you and in our communities, and why does it even happen? We have Sarah Jesse with us today to start the series off with what is domestic violence. Many people think that domestic and sexual violence only happens in different cultures. What do you have to say about that, Sarah?
Yes, I think that's a common misconception. We know that domestic and sexual violence happen to anybody. Anybody in any relationship can be a victim or a survivor of domestic and sexual violence. Abuse does not discriminate against gender identity, relationship status, culture, social and economic status, or educational background. It's rooted in power and control. So someone needs to have power and control over the other person in the relationship. So I'll give a few examples of abuse. So one common tactic that perpetrators of abuse in relationships may use is isolation. So that might look like the abuser in the relationship saying who you can hang out with, who you can speak with, when you can see your family or friends, and that sort of thing. Another example too would be financial abuse. So that might look like a perpetrator of violence saying you can't work, or where you can work, or what hours you can work. So being more controlling over those things. And just to go back to isolation too, when a perpetrator of violence does isolate their partner, that takes away those resources and that outside support too.
Sarah, what makes abuse different from a really bad argument between two people?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that every couple in any relationship is going to have arguments and disagreements, and sometimes we may even say hurtful things. We're not perfect, we're not always going to agree on everything. After an argument like that in a healthy relationship, an apology is going to follow, and then the couple will be able to move forward from that disagreement or argument. In an abusive relationship, though, the difference there is that this is a pattern of behaviors. It's a regular occurrence. It happens more frequently on a regular basis. In the case of an argument, the abuser might nitpick, might set the other person up almost. Then the survivor of domestic violence is more likely to not speak up when their boundaries are being crossed in the relationship, walking on eggshells, avoiding those difficult conversations, not saying when their needs are being met. So that's the bigger difference between the abuse in that relationship, or a healthy argument and disagreement.
Okay. And most people think of abuse as physical, but is it more than that?
Absolutely. I think that's another great question. I think we usually hear of domestic violence of having to have that physical piece to it, but we know that emotional abuse, financial abuse, and verbal abuse also happen. So bruises heal, and I'm not discrediting or negating the experience of physical abuse, but emotional abuse does take a really big toll on survivors as well. That verbal, emotional, and psychological abuse, they're used more often. It's easily hidden. They're not verbally seen. So the constant abuse of the emotional and psychological stuff, that's putting people down. It really gnaws away at our self-confidence. Oftentimes, survivors of abuse will show symptoms of depression, anxiety, and stress.
And are men victims of abuse as well?
Absolutely. So going back to that first answer, men can 100% be survivors of domestic and sexual violence. Any gender, any relationship can have that abuse piece to it. Statistics, however, do show that men often are perpetrators of abuse against women, but all individuals, or any individual who identifies as male, can also be a victim. We know that our culture does place the bigger stigma on men to be strong, not to show those negative emotions of sadness or weakness. they're told that they need to control their women. So that could go both ways as to why a man is perpetrating or why a man isn't coming forward in his relationship. In the case of same-sex couples, the dynamics of power and control are just about the same as they are in a heterosexual relationship.
Well, thank you, Sarah. And that wraps up our program for today. Again, we are staff from Independence House, Cape Cod's leading resource, counseling, and advocacy center to address and prevent domestic and sexual violence. Join us again next week as we discuss the warning signs of domestic violence. For ongoing information, you can visit our website at www.independencehouse.org. If you are in need of help, you can call our hotline at 1-800-439-6507. Thanks very much.